All right, today we are diving into a book that's sold, get this, over 40 million copies. It has completely changed the way a whole generation of people think about money. Of course, I'm talking about Rich Dad, Poor Dad. So, what are the simple, powerful, and yeah, sometimes controversial ideas that made this thing a global phenomenon? Let's break it down. So, let's kick things off with a question that probably sounds super familiar. You see two people, right? They have the same education, they're pulling in the same salary, but one of them ends up building a fortune while the other is just constantly struggling. What is going on there? What's the secret ingredient? Is it just luck, or is it something else entirely? Well, according to the author, Robert Kiyosaki, the answer isn't about how big your paycheck is. Nope, it's all about your mindset. He introduces this idea he calls financial intelligence, and he argues that this is the one thing that truly changes the entire game. And the way Kiyosaki explains this is through this powerful story of his two dads. His poor dad, that was his actual father, was a brilliant guy, had a PhD, worked for the government, but was always broke. Then there was his rich dad. This was his best friend's father, a guy who dropped out of high school, but went on to become one of the wealthiest men in Hawaii. The advice these two men gave him was polar opposite, and that contrast is the heart and soul of this whole book. Okay, so let's dig into the first huge lesson here, the radically different ways these two dads thought about money, about work, about, well, everything. Poor dad's advice was probably the exact same advice you heard growing up. You know the drill. Go to school, get good grades, find a safe, secure job with good benefits. For him, security was the ultimate goal. Rich dad? She taught the exact opposite. He said, the goal isn't job security, it's financial freedom. It's about building systems that make money for you so you don't have to work. And that leads us to probably the most famous line from the entire book, the one that just flips the whole traditional script on its head. The poor and the middle class work for money. The rich have money work for them. Kiyosaki basically says if you can truly understand that one sentence, you understand the secret. So if the big goal is to have your money start working for you, how in the world do you actually make that happen? Well, it all starts with understanding two fundamental building blocks: assets and liabilities. First up, assets. Kiyosaki keeps the definition dead simple. An asset is anything that puts money into your pocket. That's it. Think of it like a little money-making machine you own. And of course, the opposite is a liability. Sticking with that simple logic, a liability is anything that takes money out of your pocket. It's something that costs you day in and day out just to own it. And here's where it gets real. The rich, he says, spend their lives buying assets, things like businesses, real estate that generates rent, stocks that pay dividends. The middle class, on the other hand, they tend to spend their money on liabilities that they think are assets. And here's his most controversial point. He argues that even your family home is a liability because with the mortgage, the taxes, the upkeep, it's constantly taking money out of your pocket. You see, this typical path, work hard, get a paycheck, buy liabilities, this is what Kiyosaki says traps people in a cycle he famously named the rat race. So, here's how the rat race works, right? You get a job to make a salary. Then you use that salary to pay for your house, your car, your whole lifestyle. Then maybe you get a raise, so you buy a bigger house or a fancier car. Your expenses just keep rising to meet your income, and suddenly you're trapped. You have to keep running faster and faster on that hamster wheel just to keep from falling off. It's a cycle of dependency. So what's the escape plan? How do you get off the wheel? You have to focus relentlessly on one thing: building up your asset column. The goal is super simple. In theory, you need to get to the point where the passive income flowing from your assets is more than your monthly living expenses. The second that happens, you're free. You don't need your job anymore. Now, for as huge as this book is, Rich Dad, Poor Dad is definitely not without its critics. It is a very controversial book. So let's take a fair look at both its biggest strengths and its most glaring weaknesses. The book's greatest strength, by far, is its power to just completely shift your perspective. It's an incredible motivator. But its biggest weakness is that it's really thin on concrete, actionable advice. It screams at you what to do, go buy assets, but it doesn't really tell you how. And a lot of critics point out that many of the stories seem a little too perfect, maybe even exaggerated to make a point. So, with all that said, who is this book really for? Honestly, it's fantastic for young people just starting to figure out money. It's great for anyone dreaming of starting a business who needs that kick of inspiration. And really, it's for anyone who feels stuck in that rat race and just wants to see their financial life through a totally new lens.
So, if Rich Dad Poor Dad isn't a detailed step-by-step manual, what is it? What's the one big final idea you're supposed to walk away with after reading it?
Ultimately, this is the core message. The book argues that your single most powerful asset isn't a stock or a rental property or a business. It's your mind. The real secret to building wealth is a commitment to educating yourself forever, learning about money, investing, and how the system works. That knowledge, she says, is the true foundation of freedom. In the end, Rich Dad, Poor Dad isn't a map that shows you the exact route. It's more like a compass that just points you in a completely new direction. It's a challenge, really, to stop following someone else's plan and start writing your own. So the real question it leaves you with is this: what's the very first step you're going to take to build your own financial future?